The Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing.
Hey everybody, welcome to The Unconventional Therapist. This is your guide to nothing, and I am Dave.
Hi, Dave.
That's it.
Dave, you have to.
You want an intro too?
Yes.
Oh,
please,
okay.
Please.
Hey, and also I'm here with Greg,
Thank you.
aka
How are you?
the G Spot.
Oh man. Okay. You know what? I guess that is a apropos nickname for me in all my exploits. All right. So they got me off track a little bit, Dave. I'm a little flustered, a little red in the face.
Why?
I don't know. I didn't know. Judging by our topic, you might think that we were talking about some porn addiction or erotica or something, but we're not. Maybe the opposite.
Quite the opposite.
Yeah. Today we're talking about the homeless people.
Well, I say that, but there's a fetish for everything.
Mhm.
So who are we to
There
judge?
is.
I don't want to exclude anyone. So if that's your thing,
Don't put anybody in a box.
Okay. More
That's
power
not what
to
we're
you.
here to do.
more power to you.
All right. And I didn't mean that as a okay. Well, anyways, listen. So there's 525,000 homeless people in the United States. That's a lot. Is that more or less than you thought?
Say that number again.
525,000.
One more time, but in Roman numerals.
I cannot.
Oh, okay. That actually is less than I thought.
Really? Well, you'll be surprised to see how much money. All right. So, for example, in March, just this past March, the Department of Housing and Urban Development granted $2.8 billion specifically to just address this issue, this homelessness issue, right?
Oh, so it must be cured.
That's the problem.
They must have fixed it with that much money.
That's the thing. And we're going to talk about that, Dave, because there is this weird, insidious, a lot of money getting thrown at this and the problem just continuing to exist. So in America, this is a huge problem. And especially when you're saying, there's billions of dollars thrown at this issue. So we're going to try to talk about why and how people are homeless. Now, even though the reasons can be endless and we can't get through them all and we can't understand every bit of, what this multi-layered problem in just this episode, but I think we can get into it enough to have a pretty good understanding of it. And so not just the homelessness issue, we're also going to talk about a subgroup of the homeless just to keep people interested, because I know you did a little bit of research into this, these people who live deep underneath the city.
Yes. Greg, I was curious. So we have 527,000.
525,000.
All right. In the US.
Uh-huh.
How many are in Canada?
Okay. So that's a tough question.
Why is that tough? It should be just a number, right?
Less, I would think, but there's less people.
Oh, okay. How about in Mexico?
Maybe more. I don't know. The weather permitting.
Wait, did you only research one country?
Yes, and you want to know why? Because we did the Romani, and sort of, I feel like that covers a lot of the world. And for this one, I thought it'd be
You're
nice.
I already did my due diligence by doing an episode on the Romani.
That's right. And I think understanding, this is something that Americans don't do a lot. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be all over the world taking on the world's problems, but it is important to turn around and take a look at what's going on here sometimes, right? This is a problem, and it's a big problem. And I think the best way to understand it in this country is to look at California. Now, there's some crazy numbers here because California is 12% of the nation's population, but they have 30% of the homeless population.
Wow.
Yeah, and not only that, Dave, 50% of the unsheltered homeless population is in California. So I know in your brain right now, what's your assumption right now? Are you assuming anything?
I'm assuming those are way too many numbers and I'm getting lost.
Okay, so half of the country's homeless people that live unsheltered are in California.
Yeah.
So I think most people assume, oh yeah, California, the weather is great, right? People can go out there and they can live unsheltered. Plus, California is known to have a very generous social services program. So people think, yeah, that's why the homeless there. It's not a California problem. It's a country problem. And they're going to the place where it's the warmest and most beautiful, and maybe there's a lot of opportunity there. But
So that actually was something that was an idea that I had, was that it's kind of like the land of broken dreams or broken promises. Is that what they call
Mhm.
it? Where like people go out there thinking they're going to have this lifestyle, and then suddenly you realize I can't even afford anything here. I can't even afford a bag of oranges on the highway
That's right.
because it's so expensive in California.
So you are touching something there. It's weirdly, it's not that. So if you went and did a survey, which they did, a new study did this survey where they sort of a census of the homeless people in California, because they wanted to answer that specific question, like where are these people coming from? And over 90% are native to California. They're not
Yeah.
transplants.
Yeah.
And that's pretty wild.
That
That's
is
like
wild.
that's very interesting to me. I know you don't think it's wild, but
No,
it
it's
is, because
bonkers.
let's Dave, let me ask you. I keep putting you on the spot, but let me ask you about some of your assumptions of like what's your typical homeless population? Like what are they
It's
made
all
of?
over the place. It's all over the place. So wait, what do you mean? Like
I mean, like what are the social dilemmas that create homelessness in an individual?
loss of housing.
Yes.
They can't keep up with the cost of living.
Hmm.
And that I think is a huge thing. So, and I'll probably touch on this later with the topic I'm going to get into later. But I think that as cost of living goes up, people who are lower income cannot keep up, and then that causes them to eventually have like lose their housing and get displaced and all that stuff.
Yeah, so don't solve all the problems of my argument before I really get into it. I appreciate that. You're wearing glasses today, so you're coming off very intelligent, and I appreciate it. But give me a second here. So my assumptions were typically, and I don't know, and it does kind of feel this way still. It's like mental health issues for sure, right?
Yes,
Drugs, drugs going to be part of the homeless population.
absolutely.
Poverty, of course, maybe even prisoners, people coming out of prison. So typically, these are the kinds of things that we think of when we think of the homeless.
And
And
alcoholism.
alcoholism, sure. So, places like the Appalachia, I like to mention that, in Detroit. So these are the places that have the highest drug rates. They have the highest poverty rates. So they should have the highest homelessness rates if these are the people who are homeless, but they don't. Places like California do, and California is the richest with the best social programs, but they still have the highest homelessness rate. And the answer to that, the reason why that is what you're saying. It's an affordable housing issue. It's not
Yeah.
it is this issue with there's like the vulnerable population, but there's this great analogy that I heard someone say where they thought, think about it like musical chairs, right?
Hmm.
So you're playing musical chairs, and you're in there's a classroom and all the kids are playing, and the most vulnerable kids, the kid, with like a broken leg, or the slow kid, and I don't mean that mentally, I just mean in generally speaking, they're not going to get the chair because maybe they're more of the vulnerable population. And the way things are headed right now, even if you're not vulnerable, if there's not enough chairs, somebody's going to get squeezed out. And that's something that's kind of scary. And I notice happening in, even in our own backyard.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Now with California though, do they not have strict laws against homeless kind of just taking up residence on sidewalks or street corners or parks and stuff like that?
So I'm glad you bring that up. That's something that I mentally have to tiptoe around, because I understand people want to be sympathetic, and people don't really want to be homeless. But there is this permissive culture that allows like homeless encampments on streets where people have to step over excrement and syringes to go get dinner, and it's this is like this huge problem. So maybe the permissive culture again in California is certainly part of the problem. Like, what do you think about that? Like
Uh,
allowing for it, and maybe the fact that they do have such generous social programs is contributing to the
so
homeless.
have you been to California?
Yes, many moons ago.
Okay.
San
I
Diego.
I've been quite a bit.
Okay.
LA, San Diego, all over. Um I don't see it as extreme as what you just described. Like, I didn't feel like I was walking in excrement or over syringes. What I did see is some of the most creative encampments and even just like tent setups I could ever have imagined. And they were elaborate, and they're utilizing like mattresses that were discarded. It was impressive. I mean, visually, it obviously isn't a great look for a city that's trying to invite tourism in. And then you have like there was one large tent setup. It was just like an individual's tent set up right outside on a street on a sidewalk, right outside of like a nice restaurant. And I was like, wow, that is crazy. That would never fly here. That would have been removed immediately, right?
Yeah.
But
So
that's also problematic. And I get like obviously we don't necessarily want that set up right there per se, but like there needs to be a place to go as well. And if they're
that's
constantly
part of
being
the
moved,
that's part of the
that's
difficulty.
an issue, right?
There used to be all these. It's because there's so much red tape, so much bureaucracy around these things. Where there used to be like this dormitory type housing, or like these buildings where lots of people could kind of live together.
Yeah.
But especially in New York City, where the conditions got so run down that there were laws created that were like, all right, well, we can't have this anymore. And instead of being like, no, we have to have better, amenities and better, regulations on what's allowed and what's not allowed. Instead of just saying we can't have this kind of housing, it's like we can't have this kind of housing and not take care of it. That should have been more the thing. So now it's illegal to have these places where maybe people wouldn't mind living together like that. And that's and I don't know. See, this is such a difficult thing. It's like you're mentioning that you're drawing a picture of that scenario on the street, and it's like the daytime and you got that thing going on. But I wonder what it's like. Let me ask you this. Do you think it's dangerous to be homeless?
100%. I think
Okay.
that's one of the most dangerous scenarios you can be. I
So then-
actually feel so much sympathy for homeless people because of that. I and like literally there's some people that probably just want a safe place to rest their head.
Hmm.
And I don't know how you can possibly ever feel safe.
Yeah. So I kind of trick you into that a little bit because I'm saying, are homeless people dangerous?
Not all.
Not all, right? So that's the thing. So
It's like, but I would say, I mean, and when I say not all, I would say that about anybody, right?
right. But here's the thing, though. Just being in that position, so life on the street or any encampments, which maybe we'll talk about in a little bit, which we definitely will talk about, we're put in a position where it becomes more about self-preservation than it does about ethics. It's like it's what Frankel talks about when he's talking about the camps, right? Like some people are going to be able to rise above their environment and do the right thing morally, but most people aren't. So like people aren't just homeless without, like, some people are homeless with their families. And if you have
Absolutely.
like what I mean? If you have children with you and you see that, like, someone fell asleep and they have all their clothes in a bag and your child's going to be cold at night, you're probably going to take that, right? And is that morally corrupt?
Isn't that kind of the dilemma of the Romani and
It
what
sure is.
has built their reputation over time? It's like you have everything against you. You just need to survive. You do whatever you need to do to make ends meet, and then the world turns against you, even though they're the ones who won't give you any opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's tough. So what are your thoughts then about these encampments and like breaking them up? Like how
like, all right, so to me, like, at first, so I want to kind of like look at when we say encampment, what are we talking about? Because I know that like is it San Francisco where there's one of the largest I know it's somewhere on the West Coast. I can't remember one of the largest ones. I had seen a documentary a while ago, and it was like a whole area designated for people to set up tents. And like that to me seems reasonable.
Mhm.
You have an area, but also I understand the issues with that when you get a bunch of people together, and you just are like, here, this is your space. Then it's like why some homeless people avoid shelters. you're there with a bunch of people that you didn't choose to be with. You don't know anything about them. Thievery, physical assaults, rape, all those types of things. Those all occur in
because
those kind of settings.
They're existing outside of our normal. No, I say quote unquote normal, like social contract.
Yeah.
Like they're sort of in a different society.
Sure, absolutely. There's no one there to be like, "Hey, you stay in your tent tonight. Don't you come out." And also, like, as much as I want, like, I'm sure our goal here is to paint a picture that homelessness could happen to anybody. It doesn't just happen to like a certain type of like, you know, mentally ill. It's not only mentally ill people. It's not only drug addicts, but unfortunately, there is also people who struggle with mental illness, and there's also drug addicts and alcoholics who are going to be present because they are also uh, part of that homeless community. So, like, yes, there's a lot of dangers that can come even just like trying to build a collective for, for people to be able to lay their heads at night.
Yeah, so
I don't
Dave,
know. It's such a big problem.
It's a huge problem, and I think it's going to get nowhere. It's not going to get better for a while because the issue is, like we're talking about, is it's a housing issue. And when you think about like your house, like how would our kids, or even like these kids, 20 to 25 years old, looking for, even 30 right now, looking for a house. I mean, how would you even manage that? Like, I know that, the median price for a house where we live was like $215,000, 3 years ago, and now it's over 400.
Yeah.
So how would we expect, like, with the affordable housing just dipping? Yeah. I see it. I know we both see it all the time with patients, right? You must have a couple where they're like, 2 weeks away from an eviction. If they don't figure something out in 2 weeks, they're on their way out.
People are struggling.
People are struggling
to make ends meet. And if you don't have 2 jobs these days, it's like you're not in that. Like 2 jobs is becoming the norm.
Yeah.
For most families that, are trying to just make ends meet, you have one big source of income and then a smaller one or 2 decent size incomes. Like that's becoming the norm, and it is crazy. And another big issue is like when lower income cities want to improve, they want to reshape the face of their city. They want to improve it. So what do? They try to bring in businesses. They try to, what does that do for the people living there?
Like gentrification, right?
Gentrification, exactly.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I'm getting
at.
That's
a huge part of this thing.
That it makes it so the people that resided there previously no longer can afford to live there anymore, and now they are displaced, and that's another big cause of homelessness, obviously. And it's like we need to find a different way to improve the way that our lower income communities look, if that's an issue, without driving them out of their own community, their own homes.
Yeah, so I like what you're saying, to try to understand what this looks like for people. It is a progression. It's not just something you don't like. So just get this number: 81% of the homeless people were housed. That means that, and by that, I think it's important to know, because sometimes there's assumption that like these people are coming from institutions or prison or something like that. These are people who have families. Like, things happen. You get into, maybe you had a bad childhood and now you get into a relationship and that relationship ends. Maybe you lose your job and that relationship ends, and you have no place to go. You have no one to lean on. Maybe you start living in your car for a little while. Maybe, you stay on a couple couches and you have to burn some bridges, not your own fault, but it's like you're trying to find a new place to live. You're trying to work, but now maybe you lose your car, and that repossession thing, it was $500 a month. Now you need $2,000 to get it back. And it's like things start to pile up, and you just end up in this place where you're like, I followed this progression and now I'm homeless. And once the longer you're homeless, the harder it is to crawl back out of it. It's like, debt, right? It's a full-time job being homeless too. It's not like you're just sitting around all day trying to, doing drugs. It's like a lot of people are, still working, trying to find a way to get a shower, trying to find a way to work these, all the red tape and all these programs where, you hear on the radio that all these organizations get millions of dollars to help the homeless, and then the homeless can't figure out where the hell these people are or how they're supposed to help them. Right? It's there's a bureaucracy behind this. There's like these organizations who have members on the boards who are making millions of dollars to work with the homeless community. But if they end the homelessness problem, how does that benefit them if they're making millions of dollars off of the homelessness problem?
And who is overseeing where all that money goes?
Yeah, it's like the government just says, hey, look, we are doing our part. Like leaders like the governor or even the president can say like, hey, the president can say, hey, we gave $2.8 billion to homelessness. All right, well, like why are there still so many homeless people?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. That money can get allotted for that, but then who's overseeing it to make sure it actually goes into addressing the issue?
Yeah, and this is a more difficult problem. Obviously, it's more in depth than that, and this is like a decades long program that you'd have to figure out where, there's training and there's, you have to be able to get people in housing, and even if they're, on drugs or whatever else, you kind of have to like start that process, and that could be a little bit difficult. It's such a complicated issue because you can't just say, all right, in Rhode Island, we, say there's 600 people who are sleeping outside. We have a budget for the homeless, like millions and millions of dollars, so that we could probably over 600 million, right? So we could probably give them all $1 million. And why does that wouldn't solve the problem either, right? It's this strange thing where there's so much money thrown at this problem, but it's just not handling it correctly. And obviously we don't have the answers, but I know that in the same way, pharmaceutical companies make money off people being sick. What's the incentive for them to have people get better? It's the same thing with this, like, the board of directors of, the biggest homeless shelter or whatever, that Crossroads in Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's people on the board that are making, over $1 million a year just to be on that board. Exactly. And it's like, why should we solve the homelessness problem then when we won't get our $1 million anymore?
Right.
I don't know, Dave.
So, and it's a problem that's everywhere. And it's like, if you kind of sit back and you think about places you've traveled, you can probably think of like what the homeless experience was like in each of those places. And it probably looked a little different in almost everyone. But like the one thing that is consistent is it exists everywhere. I was in Austin, Texas, and driving through a random side street that I went on, and literally it was like just tents lined up the entire street. And that is a place that, like, I guess I don't know why I wouldn't have assumed it, but for whatever reason, it really took me back. I was like, wow. Montreal, I used to go there quite a bit. They always had a large homeless population on St. Catherine Street, which is like that busy stretch that a lot of like younger people like to traverse. And it was always younger homeless people there. And I would talk to them when I was there, and I'd be like, how did, I was young too, and I'd ask some stupid questions, I guess, but I was as curious. How'd you become homeless?
That's
and a lot of them were runaways.
Yeah.
From my encounters. I have this crazy experience with me and my friends. It was like 3 a.m. We run into this gentleman who asked us to buy him a burger. So I bought him a burger. I come back out. He has like a bike. He lets me ride his bike up and down the street, which was awesome because I had a stereo on it and it's blasting Corey Hart. I wear my sunglasses at night.
Yeah.
And we spent like some time with him. He was upset that there was mustard on the burger, which I thought was funny. It's like, all right, guy. But he actually said, like, he went to college. He chose to be homeless. And he asked us if we'd write to him. I was like, well, where do I send a letter? He goes, you can send it to my parents' house. And that blew my mind.
Yeah.
This gentleman sort of chose to be homeless for whatever reason.
Well, maybe it sounds like if he's got
like a pride thing,
a safety net, then maybe it's an easier choice.
That also made me wonder, is there a population of people out there who choose to live a certain lifestyle?
I'm sure. Absolutely.
Like
absolutely.
And what drives that choice? Like that one person really impacted me. I was 18 or 19, and I never have not thought about that guy when I think about homeless, because I'm like, that was such a contradiction to everything I thought I knew about people who are homeless. And I guess that kind of highlights something that I know me and you have talked about ongoing when we like long time ago talked about even doing this episode. How amazing would it be to like actually try to get some real stories from
Yeah.
people about their experience or what caused them or how they feel about it? Because I think that's part of the problem of homelessness is the general population who's not homeless has a preconceived notion about homeless people. And I think that's a real serious problem because we assume certain things about them and they're usually negative things.
There's this
Or
great quote that says, you can't hate someone once you know their story.
exactly. I 100% agree with that.
I do too. And it's like, when we talked about the book last week, when we were like looking at, the African tribe from the outside, we think we understand it. But it's like once you're in there and like maybe spending some time with the homeless and understanding, what happened to them and where they went through, you can sort of see like, oh, wow, like, a couple of wrong moves or a couple of bad breaks, and
Yeah.
that could be me.
100%.
And maybe that's why we can we're lying to ourselves if we don't admit that sometimes when we're driving down the street and there's a guy kind of asking for some money out of our window, and it's like, in my car, I'm like, oh my God, all I got is a 20. And it's like, well, and then I just kind of like face forward, and I don't know. It's like this cold. I'm just being honest. Like I've done that and I feel bad about it. And I don't know, am I avoiding that because I don't want to see, what could happen to me or what could, I just want to pretend it's not there, or it's a tough one.
I got one for you. How many times have you or you heard your parents, because I feel like it's an older generation thing that kind of was instilled in us too, driven by a homeless person and thought or said out loud, yeah, right, they're not really homeless.
Oh yeah. Like you've thought like they're
They
gonna
were,
like collect all the
they're
money
just-
and then get in their Mercedes.
Yeah.
then
Like
drive
they're
away,
making that much money.
I
and,
thought you were gonna say, I've heard a lot they're just gonna spend it on drugs.
I used to see signs of people saying like, I'm not gonna lie, this is for drugs or something. And then, there's always someone will be like, hey, I appreciate someone who's not who's just being honest. But it's like, yeah, but that's not only the case though. Like,
Yeah.
that's not the only types of people that are out there.
In the 30s or whatever it was when, FDR came up with all those government programs where instead of just giving money to people, give them jobs, put them to work, like the forestry or like cleaning or whatever it is.
Teach a man to fish.
But do you think there's an appetite for that? Because I think maybe the work ethic socially has changed quite a bit.
Even people working don't want to work.
I know.
So,
I know.
We can't even get our younger working class generation to really want to work.
So is that a part of it?
Probably. I don't know.
That's what I mean. Like,
here's the thing. I don't
so
think
layered.
Exactly, Greg. I don't think there's only one answer because I don't think that everyone's rationale, reasoning, or situation is the same. So I think it's just so hard for us to address a problem that has so many roots of origin and so many different factors, right?
When I was listening to a podcast about this, and one of the people said, there are as many reasons to be homeless as there are homeless people. Yeah. And I was like, oh, wow, that makes sense. It's an impossible thing to kind of, that's why it's like, it's like trying to catch smoke in a net. Like it's impossible trying to wrangle this. It's like ever evolving issue. And I mean, is there any real steps towards solving this problem?
You know what's also interesting? Every region, at least in the US, every area, their homeless population has a different profile or like personality. So one thing that stuck out to me from my time in like the Pacific Northwest, like in Portland, Oregon, specifically, very assertive, sort of like I don't want to use the word aggressive because they weren't not like physically aggressive, but like verbally aggressive.
Yeah.
Like, hey, can I get $1? Sorry, I don't have any money. Yeah, right. Get the hell out of here. Like yelling at you.
And it's like, you're not following homeless etiquette.
Then like taunting you as you walk down the road.
Yeah,
I was so taken back because the homeless population here in Rhode Island, from my experience, is very quiet.
Passive.
Like they'll stand with a sign. They're not like, they won't like go up to your car if you don't like kind of have your window rolled down or kind of make eye contact or something that kind of gives them the impression that you want to interact.
Mm.
For the most part, they'll stand, standoffish, right? There, I was like, oh my God, like, are they gonna like put me in a headlock or something? And it was also, like I said, it was kind of like in Portland too, it was like a little bit of a younger generation of homeless people that I was seeing a lot of in like the downtown area that I was in. And then like even down south, I've seen like spent some time in like Atlanta, and it was a little bit different than I've seen up here. It's like every area had its own like unique
Like they're gonna
personality
like
to it.
hold you upside down and make all your change come out.
Yeah. I gotta say, like my time in Portland with that experience, that was probably the more like in your face experience that I've had. And I was like, I can see why that might be an issue. Like that's gonna turn some people off.
Yeah.
But
Well,
but again,
think
I
about it like
understand
this.
it's frustrating.
Well, let's shift a little bit here because I think
Yeah.
we've talked about the encampments, and you brought up one of the more interesting examples of encampments, and when at the end we can finish up a couple final thoughts about homelessness, but I find this fascinating, and I don't know why. These underground, subterranean mole people. Is that what it?
So there, so there is I guess there's always been sort of like rumors or myths about people living underground.
Hmm.
And that has kind of spun from, there's been stories written about mole people, and it actually kind of dates back to very early history that there's actually been like societies living underground for various reasons or whatever. But in the realm of what we're talking about, I kind of wanted to leave all that to the side because I feel like that gets too much into like silly stuff versus the very serious issue we're talking about with homelessness. So around the 18th century, um, cities started to overcrowd, and sewers became, well, they had been around for like 4,000 years.
Yeah.
But when cities started overcrowding more, um, around like the mid 1800s, the sewer systems were kind of deemed as like a public necessity because they were discovering that the wastewater could carry disease.
Yeah.
And obviously, with various things going around, this was something that needed to be addressed. So this was like kind of the start of the sewer systems, like being as deemed necessary. So cities all around the world started to develop sewer tunnel systems and pipes and storm drains and all that good stuff. And then at times they would start to dry out and individuals would begin to live there. The issue with like sewer systems and stuff like that is it's not like suitable for long-term residency because like flooding and stuff like that, which, so obviously that's problematic. And it became this idea that like you could stay there for a little bit, but you kind of had to be prepared to maybe flee, and you might lose all your belongings if a flash flood happens, or you might even die, as you can imagine. So that obviously was problematic. In 1863, did you know that the underground in London was the first rail system?
I did not know that.
I didn't realize it was the first. So, and that was developed in 1863. So, after that, like other cities started to follow suit, and then tunnel systems for the rail systems became like all the craze. And New York City actually had the largest one, which was devised in after March 11th of 1888, because they were addressing a major issue that happened when there was a huge blizzard that had at least 4 feet of snow in some places. Like because of snow drifts, it was like insane amounts of snow there, and traffic was at a standstill and trains were stuck for weeks. So they were like, we got to do something to address this. And that's when New York City built their underground system. So in the 1960s, homelessness begins to rise in New York City. Some of the reasons for that, well, actually, you mentioned this earlier, which was, I was surprised. Long-term, like psychiatric facilities were starting to close.
Yeah.
So they went from between 1965 and 1979, the number of people living in institutions went from 85,000 down to 25,000. So that's great that people weren't living in these institutions anymore. Not great that they didn't have anywhere to go. So many ended up on streets and some fled to tunnels. Another reason that homelessness was on the rise was drugs were plaguing the city. So that was a big issue. People who were addicted to drugs were spending significant amounts of money, and they were unemployed and they couldn't afford housing. So that was a big issue. In the 1980s, the profiles of people who were homeless were typically like single men with drug or alcohol problems. But then after that, in the 80s, it became whole families that ended up on the streets due like urban economics, which we were talking about, gentrification and all that stuff.
Yeah, so it's like you're talking about that in the framework of like the 80s. So it's kind of the same story retold over and over again, like squeezing people out so that people, the well-off can be more well-off. Kind of the same old story.
And here's the other thing about New York City. They have a specific way they address all their issues. They send out they give police officers specific orders to use whatever means necessary and just drive it out, right? So like drugs, homelessness, whatever the issue is, it's like, let's just send our police officers out there and they're going to have to remove it. And so they did. And they had a very strict policy about like the homeless not being able to just kind of be out and about. They were seen as like an eyesore for tourism, and they were a threat. So they were even able to use force against them. And then hostility began to rise between the homeless and the police, which made it very hard for them to, the homeless population to find a place to sleep. So a lot of them fled underground.
They became invisible.
Yes. Another issue that happened in the 1970s was New York City was almost going bankrupt, and the city started to make cuts to services towards like maintenance to subways and their tunnels and all that. So they were left unguarded at times, which allowed for people to obviously, access them. And I'm sure that had a lot to do with the population that started to live underground.
So when you say,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, I don't, maybe you will, but I was gonna say, when you say underground, like, can you like paint a better, like, a picture for us? Like, what's this look like? What's this like?
Yeah, so people are literally living in unused sections of the subway systems.
So it's dark as hell.
It's dark, but there's thousands of them living down there. In 1986, a study by the mayor's office estimated about 5,000 people were living in the subway.
5, okay, that's an important point then, because it's not like 5,000 people. That's some small towns.
In 1991, a study showed that at least 6,000 were just in Grand Central Station alone.
So there's like a whole city underneath the city.
Yes. And here's the other thing is like police. So they were forcing them off the streets, right? Using force, brutality, all that stuff. They actually started though to like really become almost like afraid of the people living underground though. Because
that's horrifying.
Yeah. And there was all these like stories of them like attacking police officers, like really brutally stabbing them, things like that. So there became like these rumors, and they use an acronym, which I'm familiar with because it's actually an 80s movie, and there's a part 1 and part 2 called CHUD. Cannibalistic Humanoid Underground Dwellers.
Wow.
And that's as soon as I was hearing this description of mole people, I was like, CHUD. That's CHUD. And then they actually referenced that in the research I was doing.
Well, then it might actually, like, living underground without sunlight or anything for like extended periods of time, it probably can change your appearance, right? And make you, pale and sort of.
I heard a lot of like description like of them being covered in like soot. Wow. So in 1993, there's this journalist named Jennifer Toth, I guess her last name. But she released a book called The Mole People: Life in the Tunnels Beneath New York City. Very clever name. um,
Yeah.
she had spent a year networking with the city's homeless and exploring the tunnels beneath Manhattan, and she discovered that, and she kind of confirms this large number of people, but that they were loners. There was some mentally ill, there's drug addicts, alcoholics, or just people who kind of shunned away from human contact completely.
So does
Um,
she have like how does she get down there? Like how does she find her way to these people?
Greg, what do you want me to freaking get a trail cam and follow her down this tunnel?
You know what I'm picturing? I'm
You
picturing
have to
someone
walk
like,
down.
yeah, it's almost like to me, if you're thinking of people living underground, it's for whatever reason, it's bringing up to me like, you know, hell in a way. So it's she's being led down underneath the earth. It's the same way
Why is
I'm
she
thinking.
being led? She's going. She's just walking.
She has no guide.
No, I actually. So I heard one thing tell me that she actually had some like I forget what some guides with her, not like other homeless people, but she actually had like people there for protection just in
Okay.
case. I don't know if they were law enforcement or what. So I'm not sure. I don't think she was alone, but there is like here's the interesting thing. She discovers they actually were building organized groups within the population that were residing, underground. So there's like societal units, and then some of them were like as large as like 200 people. And there might have like different roles for people. Like someone's like a designated runner, so they're going up to the surface. They're getting food. They're getting medicine, kind of like what you would see in Walking Dead.
Or Ninja
You know what I
Turtles.
mean? Or Ninja Turtles.
Yeah. I just had this like crazy thought, a couple of these crazy thoughts where it's like she's going down there. It reminds me of like Dante like touring hell, like going down there and seeing the different groups of people as she goes lower and lower. It's like this really dark image. Also, this is the subway tunnel, so I'm also imagining like what it's like if you're in like a car or you see this, you think you see someone's face and like you think you're going crazy, but you probably did see someone under there just like living underground. What a wild thought.
Yeah, yeah. I
Now,
guess
how long are these people living down there for? Is it
there was a guy. I mean, this was 93, and I think she'd met a guy that was there since the 70s. But I mean, this like, I, it's interesting, but also like, it's not the craziest thing I've ever heard. I mean, we've heard of people living in like all sorts of stuff. Like there was a guy living in the Providence Place Mall. Remember that? He was in some like weird like sectioned off spot that was unused, and then like they discovered he had built like his own apartment inside there.
yeah.
Like people are savvy and clever, and they will find ways to live when they need to, and this is really interesting. I found it really fascinating though that they built their own society and gave people roles, because then like it comes back to that whole idea that like naturally we just kind of start to create roles for ourselves and for each other, and whenever we like no matter where we are, we just kind of develop societies.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting. That's pretty, but this is like a society in the dark. That's why I find it. That's why there's something about that
They
that
can
makes me.
find. Why do you think that it's complete pitch black?
I do.
No, they're finding access. I guarantee you. Someone's probably going to say I'm an idiot. I guarantee you they're finding access to electricity.
Oh,
Like
that's
100%.
probably true, but I think generally speaking, even to get down there is probably dark and dangerous.
Sure.
It's just
You have to, well, if you have to pass over any like live tracks, you got to be careful not to touch the tracks. You get electrocuted.
yeah. See,
So I
right
mean,
there.
they're
That's enough.
obviously they're accessing also parts that are unused. I would imagine, or some of them, which you don't have to worry about that as much. But like, I'm sure that they have setups and stuff like that. That yeah, it would be super fascinating.
What about the air though? The air quality.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the number one priority on their list.
I'm just saying.
They're gonna write a
absolutely,
letter
yeah.
to their landlord.
Pretty stuffy down here. I
Gotta
don't like it.
say.
these old
Well,
sewage pipes.
Febreze,
It goes a long way. Hey,
package would
this
go a
is
long way.
it's reminding me of when I was renting an apartment, years and years ago, and
Humble brag.
humble brag, yeah. It's
Renting an apartment.
back when it was possible, right? In this homelessness episode. But anyways, you're gonna be crazy. It was $750 a month. That's how long we'll say that's how long ago it was.
Yeah.
And so my landlord asked me to go down in the basement and check like something about the boiler. I don't know why he's sending me, but he wanted me to just do this like very easy thing. And I went down there and there was, I heard like scuffling when I was down there. And when I got down there and I turned on the light, there was lawn chairs set up in like bed style and like, drinks and everything like that and like pee bottles. And I was like, oh my God, people have been living in the basement in the house that I live in. And it's not like, it wasn't like a finished basement or anything like that. It was a very, dirt floor kind of basement.
Wait, what town was this in?
This was in Cranston.
Oh.
And it made me feel, I don't know, for right or wrong, it just made me feel, I don't know, violated in a sense. Like people were sharing my space and I didn't know. There's something dark about that. Something scary about that. I like, you hear those stories where like, someone was hearing scratching in the attic. They think it was, mice for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then, one day they go check it out and there's like a towel and like a little setup and chips up there. And someone's been living up there. Like you hear about these things. It's not just urban legend. That happened to me, So it is, I don't know. We do tend to other the homeless, but it's complicated because like you said, even in the mole world, like these are people who are, in some cases criminals, maybe rapists, maybe, drug addicts, maybe, severe mental health issues with, with untreated delusions and these things.
She witnessed people eating rats.
Well, that doesn't surprise me. I mean, you got to eat. And in the New York City subways, probably a lot of rats.
Yeah. Greg, on behalf of all of our listeners, we just wanted to say we're so sorry to hear about your trauma. When you were comfy in your apartment and there were two homeless people.
This will not stand
in your cold basement.
Yeah. I mean, obviously,
you came down in your $150 robe.
Yeah, I've been an inadequate homeless advocate for quite some time now. As I just told you that story, and I told you the story about me holding my 20 for dear life. You know what I mean? I know it's look. I have to be honest on this thing, and I want to know how can I do better? How can I do better?
Have to be. You could probably like tone the honesty down a little bit.
Yeah, probably should. I probably should. How can I do better? I mean, help me do better. Right. That's what I say.
So essentially, I think that.
Can I ask you one question before you finish that up?
Of course.
Are there kids down there?
I didn't hear anything about kids.
Good. That makes me happy.
She, a lot of her accounts were from people who had like drug addictions and, mental instability, and there were some violent individuals, things like that. But then she was hearing the stories that, they were kind of saying that they didn't feel safe in New York City's shelter system because of thievery, assault, and all those issues. So they fled underground because they felt like it was safer to fend for themselves. And that's what I mean our above ground population is doing as well. And that's where it's like we have to like just be creative. I think we have to think outside the box more and more and more and not stop until we can do our best with trying to provide the basic amount of safety for individuals.
I think you're hitting something there in a sense that there needs to be some basic access. And when I say that, I'm going to say something that I don't know everything at all, nowhere near. It's the, unconventional therapist guide to nothing. We have to remind people of that.
Yeah.
But I think that there's always going to be a homelessness issue. There's always going to be homeless people. And I think the big money that gets thrown at it is misused because people can be insidious and they're exploiting the issue to make gains. And I think if there was a real, I think there should be something set up where it's like, here is housing that's like, almost shelter, right? Where it's like safe, it's protected. You're talking about $2.8 billion. Here's shelters in cities. It's safe. It's guarded. It's regulated. And if you want in, you can have in, and if you don't, you don't.
It's like, can we
Um,
just build some walls in these damn shelters?
you know,
That feels like a start.
I mean, yeah, like some
Section it
privacy,
off a little bit.
some private, yeah, like that's what I mean. It's where is these like it seems like there's a lot of people with their degrees talking about philosophy and societal shifts that could be made, they're getting paid to have these ideas and these talks where it's like, dude, talk is cheap. Like, do start something, try something, action. That's what we need. I mean, no one needs to hear your theories on how in 30 years this is going to work. It's like, no, we need to try to make something work right now. Like, what can we do right now to make it so the people who don't want to be freezing outside aren't? Because obviously we have the money to take care of that.
You're right, though. Like that's the thing. I feel like sometimes the topic gets talked about so broadly, but let's be honest, there are some people who are not gonna, they will probably always be homeless.
Yeah.
Like they just, for whatever reason, they won't be able to maintain housing if they were, even if it was like gifted to them. Like they just don't seem to have that capacity, and maybe they need a different level of care. But there are people out there who would probably love the opportunity
Yeah.
and would, do whatever they could to get it. And those seem to be the people that we need to assist in helping them find out, how do you get access to this stuff?
Yeah, it seems like a good first step is better, safer shelters. And if you want to talk about your theories, then maybe you start having conversations about what shifts we can make to have more affordable housing and more housing in general. Because more houses or more housing in general creates, more opportunity for homeless people.
And
it's just simple, I think.
And let me ask you, Greg, what do you think about the issue with gentrification?
It's complicated because that those neighborhoods being bought up by people who don't exist in that neighborhood. So that sucks, right? It's you know what it's like? It's like imperialism. It's like Great Britain going to India and saying like, no, we're gonna make this better for you. This is gonna be better now. We're gonna come here and this is gonna be better now. And it's like, dude, you came in here and this thing that we loved, you ruined. It's not better now.
So
because
how do we fix that though? Because you can't necessarily say, no, you can't buy that property, but can, like, on a state level or a town level, then put blocks up as in regards to like what types of businesses they are able to put into certain economic neighborhoods. I don't know like how you even classify this, but like,
I guess it's just it's difficult because money is always going to be the loudest person in the room.
Like what's the motivator to make them want to block a business, I guess. And can they even block a business? Probably not, I would imagine, but
you should be able to with zoning, right? But if you can, make it lucrative for the people who are making the decision, that's how these things happen. It's never the people who are just hanging on by a thread that are going to have any say in anything, and that's what sucks.
Yeah.
I just want to read one thing. I asked my cousin, who has been working with the homeless community at the VA for, I don't know, 20 years. And I just asked her a question. I said, what makes a homeless person? Mental health, drugs, poverty, ? And she said, that's a big question. But when I first started working with veterans who were homeless in 2008, I'd say it was mostly related to alcohol and substance use and mental health issues. It was also mostly Vietnam and post-Vietnam era veterans. I'm not exactly sure when, but probably around 2011, 2012, a lot more Gulf War, Iraq, and Afghanistan veterans started to appear. I don't have any data to support this, but a lot of them had childhood trauma and military trauma on top of it. That resulted in a lot of substance use and alcohol use. A lot of veterans didn't have any family support because they had burned all their bridges in one way or another. In the more recent years, there seems to be financial and relationship issues. There was always financial issues, but the rents were more affordable and there was a lot more availability of apartments to rent. I hope that helps. So that's kind of exactly what we're talking about here, right?
And I mean, and this is someone working in the VA. So obviously like the connection to the different wars and the veterans, like that's the entire population that she's
Right.
dealing with, but like she's seeing the exact same themes here. And
Yes.
that's so interesting because it's like, I mean, that's kind of just proof, right? That this isn't just something that, people are saying. This is real life.
This is what she's seeing on like day to day. It used to be, you would find people and there would be the drugs and the alcohol and the abuse and all these things, and you could kind of find a way to get them back on track. And then when you did get them back on track, there was housing available. And now it's like the financial piece is a lot more. It's a difficult,
And
it's
and
an
we're
uphill battle.
probably behind a little bit, right? Because like we're not so much. I mean, obviously, tourism in certain parts of Rhode Island is big, like Newport, but like you don't see a ton of homeless population in Newport, regardless, because it's always been expensive to be in Newport. But like New York City, like I was saying, in like the 80s and stuff like that, when they were like New York City tourism's really big, so it probably started to happen there sooner with like gentrification, trying to get like better businesses in there, and just like the price of living. So they've probably been struggling with this probably longer than places that maybe tourism and things like that weren't always like such a primary focus. Like we're not sitting around here like, oh, no one's going to visit like this Warwick, Rhode Island.
Yeah, no one is going to visit.
Yeah. So like, I mean, actually, we do have a ton of hotels there, but it's not like a tourist spot. So like, that's not a
No, actually, and ironically, they're filled a lot of the time with homeless.
Yes. Yep.
Which is another thing,
which I think is good.
I think it's good too. But the thing is, where they're like, all right, this is another idea of like money they're throwing at it. So they're spending money on hotel rooms, top rate for homeless people, like for the winter, instead of taking that money and building something specifically for that. It's like, that's like the difference between renting and owning. It's like, okay, so you just threw, millions of dollars at this problem, but when the spring comes, it's over and they're just back on the street, and you've gotten nothing with that money. It just doesn't, it's just not smart.
I actually heard a story about a hotel in Montpelier. There was somebody I was working with who was in Montpelier one night. I'm talking about Montpelier, Vermont, and they were trying to get a hotel one night, and they couldn't get a hotel because the town had actually allowed their homeless population to utilize all the rooms. It was like later in the evening, so I guess they probably assumed they weren't going to have any more guests or whatever. Right. And I was like, that's kind of a nice thing. And I wonder how often they do that, or if there was like, what was the cause of them doing that? But like, if you have a room available, you're not going to rent it out, and you're able to offer that to somebody, like what a nice gesture. I understand not every business is going to be willing or able to do that, but like, it's in theory, that's such like a humanistic thing to do.
It is, but we had a hotel in Warwick, Nilo, and it was an interesting case because it was in a neighborhood.
Yeah.
So there was there was uproar in the neighborhood because there was, people outside all hours of the night. Then you see the syringes, and this is like families around, and then it becomes difficult. So how do you get the homeless population to be less?
Maybe those families shouldn't be leaving their syringes all the time. That'd be such a big issue.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I mean, though? It's like we do ignore these things that are, typical traps with like homeless encampments, like why people want them.
It's such a like, I don't know. People can be so weird though. It's like they're mad because they leave their syringes on the ground while they're probably leaving their, like, I'm sorry that you're appropriately disposing of your syringe in your trash can that you own.
Yeah. I feel
like just people love to like look at other people and like judge them, and they're like, they have no sins,
I know, I get that, but I do understand it too. Like we wouldn't, you wouldn't want that in your neighborhood. What I don't understand is like, why can't you just throw your syringes in a more appropriate place?
Because there's not enough trash cans around. Like sometimes there's literally not enough trash cans around too. I do think that's a problem.
Okay, I like that. Like, there we go.
Honestly,
that seems like step one.
That bothers me, and I think there should be recycling everywhere too. But like, hey, let's just start with a trash can.
Looks like we got. Hey, look. Looks like if anything, we came up with the step one.
But honestly, at that hotel, that's just lazy, because even if there wasn't a trash can available at the hotel, There's a mall across the street.
Yeah,
There's
there's
definitely
trash.
a trash can at the mall.
Yeah.
That
Come
is
on.
a little lazy. Come on.
I mean,
Do better.
please just
Do
do a little
better
bit
with
better.
your syringes.
I mean, I don't want to like be lecturing the homeless population, but come on, we can do a little bit better than that.
You're better than that.
Yeah, please. It's step one.
And
All
and
right.
you know, I think I got a little salty there for a second because
You did.
I hate the fact that like, and I think that's my goal for this episode is for us to just like lift that stereotype off of the homeless population being only those leaving syringes around because that's
I know.
not it.
I know.
Right.
Well, but so you have to be able to do it's dialectic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You have to be able to lift that stereotype, but you also have to accept that that's part of it too.
Oh, I know. Trust me, I know.
Yeah.
But like, I do think that we have to, as a society, look at the big problem that it's not just that these days.
No,
That is a
no,
big
it's
problem.
not. It's not. And it's a more complex problem that needs complex solutions.
Yeah.
And,
A few pop culture references
I like
for
that.
homelessness, right?
Okay.
Well, I said Chud, which you
Oh yeah.
love
Okay.
that movie, right?
Dave's gonna list a bunch of movies no one's ever heard of. Here we go.
Chud.
Can I say a movie before you do?
No, I'm going to say it right now because I know what you're going to say.
What are you gonna say?
Fisher King.
No.
You ever
What is
seen
that?
it?
No.
Robin
no.
Williams.
Oh yes.
Genius
How
movie.
do you like them apples? I'm just kidding. I know that's a different movie.
Oh my God. What? Go ahead.
Oh, so I was just gonna say with the mole people, I remember I used to watch this movie with my dad, The Time Machine, and the Morlocks, they live underground.
Yeah.
Those blue guys.
It's
And
an H.G. Wells
H.G. Wells. Yeah.
book.
Or Jules Verne.
Or
Journey to
Vern
the Soul.
Troyer from Austin Powers.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, little mini-me.
Was he homeless?
No, you said it was like
Jules. I didn't think
word association.
Jules Vernon Troyer. Okay.
Yeah.
Surreal Life. Here we go. Where are we going in from here? Oh, we must be running out of things to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's okay. You got anything else on this?
No, do you?
I mean, I don't. And I hope, see, that's the thing. That's why I'm saying like the talk gets you nowhere. That someone needs to take action on this. And, you know, if they do something substantial, like create like a housing, you know, like dormitory type thing, like a barracks even kind of thing, where people don't have to freeze and die from exposure. And even if there's rules like, hey, look, we've got trash cans everywhere. We're going to keep this tight, you know, and, you know, like almost, I don't know. There's something there. We could talk about this forever, and I don't think that we need to. We might talk in circles, but I just wish there was more action instead of talk. There's just so much talk when it comes to this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do want to say to people who are actively working with this population or on issues related to this issue, I appreciate you guys, and I think you're doing, the work that needs to be done, and it's a challenge, and I can only imagine how frustrating it must be on a daily basis. That I don't know, it must feel like things aren't getting better, I would assume, but maybe people see it differently that are actually on the field, doing it. But like I just give people a lot of credit that are out there doing that work specifically. I know that like the work that we do feels good, and that we, work with various populations, and they're dealing with various issues with, economic stress and all that stuff. But like this population is very challenging because like it must feel very hopeless at times. But it's good that people are doing it. So that's
Keep
all
up
I
the
got.
good work.
Keep up the good work. And we will keep up the mediocre work as
Keep up
we
the
come
work.
come back next week. So everybody, thank you so much for all the support, all the messages, all the love, everything that you guys do. We're going to ask again, probably won't get one, but like, it'd be awesome if you guys would share, rating and review, let people know what you think of the podcast, help us get the word out, help us hit those algorithms and all that good stuff. And in the meantime, we are in December. Holidays are coming. Make sure you are taking care of yourself and all your loved ones. Watch your stress levels and all that good stuff. And also, it's, cold and flu season, so make sure you're taking care of yourself.
Did you get your shot yet? Did you get a flu shot?
I'm not gonna say that on air.
Okay.
That's HIPAA.
Okay.
That's HIPAA, dude.
Fair enough, dude. I like it. Keep
This
it
guy
secret.
trying to make me say all my.
If you do take a
records.
flu shot, make sure you throw that thing away. You know how we feel about it.
Appropriately,
Be part of the solution.
and get it in your arm,
That's
not
right.
anywhere else.
Please.
Yeah. So, all right, everybody, have a wonderful rest of your week. We will see you next Tuesday, and that's it. Signing off. This is Dave.
It's actually Wednesday. See you next Wednesday.
Wait, we release on Wednesdays?
That's right. No, Tuesdays. Sorry.
He's dumb. All right. See you later. Good night. That was the dumbest thing.